Hey comrades, what's up? It's time for another week of Bond stories and events for us here. So we're going to start off with Triangle. Triangle is the kind of military force within the Ark. So they keep order and deal with like the Outer Rim and stuff like that, right? So they're a little different than ACPU, and they can go out on missions to the surface, but that's not like their primary role. So the leader of Triangle is Eula. So Eula's Bond story begins when, and they come up a bit later, but I kind of figure like, let's just knock this out now. There's like a section of the main story that we're going to come up to in the next couple of months, where we just get tons of like the Nikkes that haven't had like stories into the main story. So I figure we'll just start covering down what we can before we even get there. That way you have like a base idea of who these people are and what's going on. Unless there's like a specific, like with Exotic, their Bond stories take place specifically after a certain point in the main story. But these guys, it's kind of just like whatever. So we'll go ahead and knock this out. So Eula, so we wake up stinking of alcohol. And also a bunch of bites in our necks. The counters come in and confirm, yep, you got bit all over your neck. And Ainz wants to help us to remember what happened the night before. So we start talking about it. Remember drinking with somebody and then going to an alleyway with them. And at that point, Rappy mentions Eula because she's got shark teeth. And we're like, oh yeah, it was Eula. She was in a bad mood. She took us to a hotel, told us to take responsibility, and then bit us. And then something about going slowly. We think that we did some sex. At that point, she texts us asking us where we're at. We ask her to meet up with us, and then head off. We meet up with her at a nice restaurant. After eating there, we take a little walk around. We talk about how last night was a mistake. Let's forget about it. We both agree. She then leaves. Later on, we head over to Triangle HQ because we've been ordered to go learn how to do some paperwork bullshit. And apparently Eula is going to train us, which is awkward. Both Private and Admi get spooked off by Eula when they're questioning us about what's going on, about why, about like you and Eula seem like you have some issue, and then Eula, who's their boss, is like, get the fuck out of here. So at that point she takes us to a warehouse where we have to organize supplies. And then we're working on that, doing that, and then Papillon shows up, and Papillon is an Nikke who's in NPC jail. She has some stuff that goes on in the main storyline, but then she disappears forever as of April 2025. So we'll know. I don't know if we'll ever see her again, but she doesn't play that much prominent of a role. So we'll get to it in the main story. But for now, it's just she's there. She exists. She works for Berghem directly, but that's all you really need to know. That's why she's here at the central government office. So we talk to her, and then she mentions how Eula is like the monster of central government. And she mentions that she knows that we were at a hotel with Eula, and she kind of pokes at the bandages on our necks, asks us, and then she's like, oh, maybe you take us there next time. At that point, Eula enters and Papillon like gets the fuck out after Eula threatens her. And she mentions something about, again, Birmingham is not there to protect her. Birmingham's another deputy director like Anderson. We've only seen him thus far in like my recollection of events in my videos all the way back in Brand New Year, when he ordered us to go get that Mighty Morphin Power Ranger toy for his niece. I think it was a niece or nephew. Anyway, at that point, we remember some more of what happened the previous night. We did promise to stay with her, meaning Eula, and then she accuses us of faking memory issues. We deny it and convince her to wait for us to finish so that we can go somewhere. At that point, she takes us to her office. She explains more paperwork stuff about each Nikke that goes on missions has to have paperwork done, and she does it alone because Private is too sloppy, and Admi would panic if she had to sign something. So Eula is definitely not getting enough sleep, so we decide to help her. We convince her, after working, we convince her to go drinking with us. So at that point, we spend... Let's see, we said we work all through the Triangle's paperwork for the month. Oh, so we spend 2 days working on all the paperwork. We get caught up for a full month so that she can sleep. She doesn't want to. She's got more paperwork to do. There's always more paperwork to do. And we remember that the hotel visit, it was like the same thing. She wasn't sleeping, so we forced her to go to the hotel. She bit us so that we would know her pain, and then she just passed out. There was no sex. We are trying to take her to the hotel again so that she will sleep. But this time at the hotel, we reveal that we thought that we had sex. She gets mad, and then she gets real rough with us, and we start kissing and demands we make a move. So then we have sex. The next day, it's revealed that the sex happened all night. Someone's like, you guys look terrible. It's because we got no rest. Admin and Private start asking about it, but then Eula shoos them off again. We then discuss the sex and about doing it again. She gets embarrassed and runs off, but then later texts us about meeting in a bar again so that we can have more sex. Lord Eula. Next up in Triangle, we're going to talk about Add Me. So we're hanging out, we're hungry, so we're looking for a place to eat, and while we're walking around, we see Add Me in an alleyway feeding a cat. She's looking around the cat for the collar identification because this is like a real animal, and as we talked about with the Bow Wow Paradise, the animals are very highly, and some other stories too, they're highly regulated by the central government because there's not a lot of them, and we want to make sure they're okay, so that they all have identifications, and it's pretty surprising that this cat has been abandoned. While we're standing there talking to her and hanging out with the cat, she hears our stomach growl, and so she feeds us too. She feeds us and the cat. At that point, she wants to call ACPU, but we're like, hey, you seem to get along with this cat. Why don't you take it? And she's like, I can't. I'm a Nikke. Like, there's no way. I don't even want to touch the cat because I can't get near it, and I can't keep it, so it's gonna be sad. And she doesn't want to make the cat feel sad by abandoning her again. Oh, so we call ACPU, and Polly comes and gets the cat. Add Me waves goodbye and the cat tries to go to her again. And then we're trying to think about how we can get Add Me a cat. We're talking to Rappy about it, and she mentions that it's completely legal. But then we see a commercial for Cosmo Burger. It's a new burger place Tetra's opened up, Mustang specifically. It's the CEO of Cosmo Burger. And if we go to all these if we go enough times, we can collect a bunch of sets, and then we can trade those sets in for a cat plus. So we contact Add Me to meet us there that evening. Once we get there, we explain the situation. We eat burgers till we get and then we eat until we get like what we need. And then we end up over time going to a bunch of different places. There's a picnic, and at some point, I think we have to go 10 times, and on time number 8, she gets super embarrassed because we're getting closer to our goal, and she's like, I don't know, I'm starting to develop feelings, and I don't want to be abandoned as well, so she cuts us off. A few days later, Add Me gets a question about her behavior by Privity, and then Eula calls Add Me out for getting burgers with that guy. She tells Add Me to go ahead and pursue us and stop being like a little bitch. So she contacts us, and we plan to meet up. During the meetup, she confesses to have feelings, and she doesn't want to get closer before we run off to help another Nikke. This gets brought up a few times in these Pawn stories. It's like, you just hang out with all the Nikkes and help them all, and it's like, well, yes, and have the sex. So at that point, she's sad because we're just going to, she can't have us like all by herself, so then she cries and runs off. We go find Eula. She tells us to not pursue Add Me if we are just going to, hit it and quit it. And then tells us that she's always either here or in the alleyway from all the way back in the beginning with the cat. So we go to the alleyway and just wait. Eventually she arrives and we meow, which indicates to her that she can decide if she wants to have a relationship with us or not, I guess. She then tells us that when she was human, her father was the commander, and that she died in some sort of attack trying to save him, and that's when she became a Nikke, which is all good at first because then she could be, her father was her commander, and it was all good and stuff. But eventually he grew to hate her, and then he abandoned her, and that's why she has these like very severe like abandonment issues, specifically with the commander, and that's super sad. Anyway, at this point, she's like, I'm not going to let like the tragedy of my past affect the future, and decides to pursue a relationship with us. And we pat her head, and then our stomach growls, and so we hold hands and head off to get some more burgers, which wraps up her story. The last member of Triangle is Privity. Privity's a beloved character. If you play the game, you essentially get her for free. She's all right. She's got a made version as well, which is much better, but we'll get to that when that event pops up. Anyway. So Privity hears that Rappy is out at the outpost, so she comes to visit because they're friends or something. I don't know. That was hinted at in the story from the... they did show up in the story, the previous one. I don't know why I said that stuff at the beginning. Anyway, we have been introduced to Triangle, so here they are. Very professional on my part. So after that event, Privity hears that Rappy's hanging out over there at the outpost, so she comes to visit. And then she comes to brag and talk shit to Rappy because she's like a frenemy, I guess. I don't know. And she talks about how better her place is. And then at some point, we're like, hey, you want to come for a tour with us? And she's like, sure. So we go to Cafe Sweetie for coffee, of course. At first, she's like, no, I don't want any. But then she's like, oh, this is really good. And then we take her around some more, and she's like, wow, I can't believe this place just for Nikke. This is awesome. And so she starts making daily trips to the outpost to deliver supplies and to get coffee. And she starts to hear from some of her human squad mates that they're concerned because she's spending a lot of time over in the outpost where there's just Nikkes. Because dun, 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 no one else in Triangle knows that Eula, Add Me, or Privity are Nikkes, apparently. Or at least Privity. And so she gets very concerned about that. And on one delivery, she's hanging out with Milk when a documentary comes on the TV, and it's about Nikkes. And it's one of those like very negative Nikkes about how they're terrible and how like they're stealing our men. Obviously, they would. And then and then Milk's like, oh, I got to call. While they're watching it, she's like, this is bullshit. Anyway, I got to go. I got a case I got to go solve or whatever. But here, drink this beer. It's specifically made to help Nikkes get drunk. And hey, you, Commander, you hang out here with Privity and like watch the place. And the smoke leaves. And so we're like, hey. And so Privity, who is now drinking and getting drunk for the first time since she became a Nikke, starts to really open up about how sad she is, about how she, wants to get along with. She loves her squad mates in Triangle, but she's also like all the humans essentially, and she likes working with them. But also, she feels like she likes coming here because then she can just be herself. She can be a Nikke and she doesn't have to hide who she is and all this really good stuff. And we tell her, hey, you can come by anytime you want. Back at a Triangle later on, Eula questions her about all these supplies. She's like, hey, you've been taking a lot of supplies over there. Like, who's authorized this? And Privity's like, me? And then she goes off to Eula about she doesn't like being looked down upon by her squad mates, even if they don't know they're doing it because she's a Nikke. And how she loves the outpost because it's got coffee, respect. It's made for Nikkes. But she doesn't want to leave Triangle either because she really likes it here. And then Eula's like, well, you're on leave for delivering all the supplies without permission, so get the fuck out of here. Back at the outpost, Rappy's like, hey, did you know Privity's just like hanging out here? And then we get a message from Adme about Privity being in the outpost. And we're like, oh, that's weird. So we wander around, we don't see her. And then eventually we head back to our room, and there she is. We assure her that, hey, you're always welcome here. You don't have to worry about coming here for supplies. You don't have to deliver supplies. You can just like show up to the outpost whenever you want. You don't have to make like a weird excuse to come out here. And then at that point, Privity holds herself up in her new room at the outpost that we got for her in like the dorms. And then Rappy mentions that Triangle and the first squad are very close. Specifically, like, Privity and her squad mates in the first squad of Triangle are very close. And she probably misses them a lot and doesn't like she likes being here, but she likes having both, eating her pie, having her pie and eating it too or whatever. And then her squad mates probably miss her too because they're pretty close over there with like the military bullshit. So then we go to her room and we pretend that like her squad mates got hurt. So she opens the door. And then once we're in there, we help her see that she has a ton of messages from her friends back at the General Government. They all miss her. They call her Princess Privity. And then she hops into like the chat group and is like, hey, what are you guys talking about? And they all like skedaddle out of there. And then she's like, I need to go back and spend time with my friends there and my friends here. And so then she practices a speech with us that she can give to Eula and Adme. And little does she realize about like, I'm sorry, I'm going to do the right thing. I'm not going to care so much about this and blah, 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 blah. And then Eula's like, I'm standing right here. And Privity's like, oh, fuck. But that's okay. Eula forgives Privity. She's welcome back to Triangle. And they head back. And then, sometime later, Privity is back at the outpost. But this time, she's here to like officially help train us in physical readiness. Quote unquote. And then Rappy is like, okay, wink, wink. And leaves Privity and the Commander together to have sex. Maybe, I don't know. Anyway, that wraps up her Bond story. All right, so this the next event that pops up is Cherry Blossom. This one stars Sakura, who is one of the members of the Underworld Queens. And so I'm gonna do her Bond story afterwards. All the Underworld Queens have their own events. So there's Moron, literally Moron, and Rosanna and Sakura, and they each are in charge of like a gang. Like Sakura is the Japanese one, so she's got the Yakuza or the Seimeki. I might just call them Yakuza because I'm trying to remember exactly how you say it. Then Rosanna's in charge of like the mafia, like the Italian mafia, obviously Rosanna, and then Moron is the Chinese, like the triad. Okay, they have different names, obviously, but I don't remember them. Anyway. Yeah, you can look it up if you really care. Anyway, so Sakura, she's one of the Underworld Queens. She's watching a romance drama on her tablet. It's all about love, kisses, and how you kiss for love eternal and whatever. And then at that point, she's interrupted by a subordinate. The ARC's going to present a real cherry blossom tree at this year's like cherry blossom festival. At that point, they're interrupted because another member in the gang who's super concerned that there's no heir because the Saimeki or the Yakuza, they're ran by like the same family that's just like continued to inherit it. So like her parents ran it and now she's running it and like her grandparents ran it and stuff. But they apparently don't know in this Yakuza guild that she is a Nikke. So there's no possible way for her to have like an heir. But also she's going to like live forever. So she's going to have to like deal with that at some point. That comes up here. Anyway, Sakura silences them, and then she declares that the Cherry Blossom Festival will be hosted by her to let the other gangs know, and that she's going to go find a husband. So of course she comes to us, asks us to pretend to be her husband, and at that point she reveals she's a Nikke, in case you forgot what game you were playing. But apparently this was news to us. I love it. It's like, I am a Nikke, dun dun dun. It's like, yeah, of course you are. You're literally the banner character. Anyway, so she's getting a lot of pressure from her clan, as it's already been ruled through hereditary, and of course she will live forever. Blah blah. Okay, I already talked about this stuff. And Nikkes can't have babies. Oh, sad. We're gonna help and. After she explains the plan, we're going to go kiss under the Sakura tree that should shut people up for a while. So we head out to the festival with her. We're followed by a bunch of her bodyguards, and at some point we run into Uni and Mahara. They come up, they tease us, like, ooh, boo, 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 boo. And then Sakura feels kind of bad that we're not hanging out with our friends, and I'm like, those bitches be crazy. It's fine. I'd much rather hang out with you. Next up is Moron. Moron, again, is the head of the Chinese mafia, the pseudo-Chinese mafia. I'm trying to remember what their names are. Anyway, the triad, essentially. She declares that she's heard about the wedding and she's completely opposed to it. They go back and forth about who's in charge of the festival, whether it's Sakura or Moron. And then we learn that each and every festival that one of the queens is in charge for safety, to make sure there's no of these other underground types. So the underground queens work they work for Tetra, kind of maintaining peace and all this stuff with the underground, kind of like what Exotic does out in the Outer Rim. So they kind of, but the underground queens, they function between the Arc and the Outer Rim, mostly hanging out in the Arc, while Exotic kind of hangs out in the Outer Rim for the most part. Morin gets upset because we are not being loyal to her or Sakura, and then she doesn't seem to. She can't make up her mind whether she's upset about the loyalty for her or Sakura or whatever. And then she says, we can't get married until she approves. And the Sakura says, none of your damn business. At that point, Noise shows up. Noise is a member of a totally different squad. We'll get there when we get there. But her squad's like music, it's Noise, Volume, and Aria. So she shows up being like, you're getting married? I'm shocked. And then she complains about getting married, and also her performance got canceled. Poor Noise. At that point, Sakura's had enough. She tells her bodyguards to distract them, and we head away. At some point, we question the necessity. Sakura reminds us, hey, you made a promise, so you're going to follow through with it. And then she talks more about this deal as we walk away. And it comes across in the writing that Sakura has a lot of self-esteem issues. She keeps mentioning, hey, if you really want, you can just go. And you're like, no, we made a promise. We're going to go through it. She's like, okay, I don't know if I'm worth it. Stuff like that. Then at some juncture, we hear a ruckus over by some of the Sakura trees, and it's some asshole trying to get money from Taurus. We approach and challenge him. He laughs, gathers his crew. At that point, Sakura summons the Seimaki, and they take care of the problem real quick. What's it taken care of, though? We find out these guys belong to a member of an underground, mafia-style group called Liberty. Sakura's never heard of them, and once again, Morin shows up, and she's also never heard of them. Sakura tells Morin that she needs to watch the festival while Sakura goes and takes care of Liberty. And then she tells us to stay there, but we're like, no, we're your husband, we're going to go with you. And she's like, all right, I'll allow it. And then Morin's confused because there was some back and forth she didn't quite understand, but apparently Morin's an idiot because her name's Morin. So time goes by. Sakura's all her gang is looking for Liberty. Then she starts talking about the oath. And so there's an oath the Underground Queen's made with Mustang, who's the only CEO, and this is crazy, he's the only CEO who has never changed. Now, we're going to find out more about this in the 2 events. So in 4, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, about 4 weeks, when I get into, Overspec. It's the first major, it's the half anniversary event. The anniversary events are always huge, story points. Well, a lot of these are this one is just kind of a fun throwaway. The anniversary events and half anniversary events always reveal a lot of the background of the world, and we get a lot more information on why this ended up like it is and stuff. Anyway, but we know that the Rapture, these CEOs have been around for 100 years, if not more. And so that means Tetra, that brings up a lot of questions about Mustang. And we even start to question it before she just hand waves and moves on. Because Elysion and Missilus have had several CEOs. Okay, so Mustang made the queens in order, again, to keep order in the Ark and Outer Rim. And instead of using leashes like Seyun does with Exotic, he used crowns. So we get kind of like a flashback where they all agreed to do this. And then we find out that Sakura's crew is the oldest. And that Rosanna wasn't in charge of a gang when she became a Nikke, that she had to like take it over. But that Moron and Sakura were already like members and like leading these gangs when they got transformed into Nikkes and took it over. And their oath that they promised Mustang is keep order in the Ark. And so none of them will ever betray Mustang's trust. And so she finishes her story, and right as she does, her goons come and tell us that they found Liberty. So we track down the leader. They're arrogant as fuck, and they even take a shot at Sakura. So she threatens them some more. They freak out. So Sameki just completely destroys them. Then the guy rants about the queens being selfish, yada yada. She's like, you know what? You're right. You're now part of my gang instead. So now you can have access to all our wealth and resources and whatnot. And then the whole of the Liberty gang gets dragged off. And then once they're all gone, she's like, I do this all the time. And we're like, what? She's like, it's better to show kindness to those you have beaten. That way they don't become resentful and like build up and cause more problems. So apparently every time she beats a gang in one of these situations, she incorporates into her gang, and that's her gang keeps becoming bigger and stronger and whatnot. She then asks us if we want to continue with the day, with getting the kiss under the tree and whatnot. And we say, yeah, heck yeah, we do. And then what about Moron? And she's like, I'll take care of that. So she contacts Moron and tells her to meet us over at the festival because she's got a plan. So a little bit later, we're back at the Sakura tree, and we set up a little picnic. There's like blossoms falling. It's very romantic. Moron shows up. Sakura gives her some alcohol that's made especially for not just Nikkes, but for Moron. She tells her to drink it all. Moron starts to get completely blasted to the point where she can't even sit up. Sakura's like, all right, mission accomplished. Let's go. Moron is like, no, wait. But we just leave her resting under the tree. As we get closer to the eternal Sakura tree, which was brought down from the surface and made to last forever and be able to exist in the Ark, which remember can't have plants because there's no actual sunlight, she tells her bodyguards to stay back. We talk about how nervous she is, and we offer her a hand. She takes it. We continue. We continue to discuss her oath as we continue along our path. And she kind of explains about this everlasting Sakura tree, that it is a real tree, but it's been genetically modified to last forever, which is just like her. Right? Sakura. It's very poetic. We discuss her place in the gang, and someday she will have to leave. And then as we get closer, we kiss, which kind of wraps up the story, leaving us with the epilogue where later Moron and Noise are harassing us in our room. Sakura comes in and tells him to leave her husband alone. And then we leave with Sakura to go back to the festival, while again Sameki and the gang members stop Moron and Noise from following, which wraps up that event. All right, to finish up this week's journey, we're going to talk about Sakura's Bond stories. So this takes place after Cherry Blossom, which is the event we just talked about. We're hanging out in our room, and we get contacted by a mysterious individual who calls himself Kitsune, which is the mystical seven-tailed fox from Japanese mythology. This person's also very mysterious, but they're very concerned for Sakura. There's some interfighting in the Sameki group, and they want us to go help Sakura out. So we barge into her mansion and tell her we're going to spend more time with her. At first she's like, no, get out of here. Then she's like, all right, that's fine. I'll come up with an excuse. The excuse is you're going to shadow me to kind of help out with stuff. So we're taken to her room, and we're told to follow up with her in the morning at 7 o'clock. So this meeting occurs the next morning. She's coming ahead with some guy named Genjao, or Genzao, because it's not Chinese. Something about closing a business or something. It's really heated, and then we get involved stopping the meeting. Sakura then takes us out and looks at the cherry blossoms, while we have some like real black tea. 'Cause remember, Splendid is like all the food and stuff. And we're like, yum, yum, this is fucking delicious. She talks more about her promise to Mustang as well as her parents' legacy. She then discusses the difference between black and dark blue, comparing it to how she has to run her organization. So there's black and there's dark blue. They look very similar, but they're different enough. So black is like doing something truly evil, but she likes to work in the dark blue because she allows a little bit of evil things here and there so that she can continue to keep her oath to Mustang, which is to keep the Ark and the Outer Rim safe, right? She works in kind of like an area of gray, if you will. And so we understand that position, and we think we can help. So the next day, we take Sakura out on a date in the Ark. We head to the Cherry Blossom Cafe. They pay her protection money, and the owner is like super thrilled because he's like, none of these other assholes are bothering me. I think specifically Moron's Guild. We order a little bit of food. We get tons of food because this guy actually really likes paying the protection money because it's a lot easier for him to feel comfortable to do his job. Then we talk about how she looks relaxed, and when she's relaxed, she's better able to handle the stress with her subordinates and everything else. And we also promise to help her find a good compromise to her situation. Later on, Sakura finally tells us what the issue is. So at some point, someone found like a super addictive plant, or a plant, brought it down that is super addictive, like a drug, and then they're able to kind of modify it so that it will grow in the Ark, and they have the special room where they can like grow it. And the problem is when it's cultivated, it releases a poison gas that kills people. So it's not that it's an addictive drug. But losing her people, it's like completely unacceptable. But others think the money is worth it because they're making so much money. So if they lose some people, it's not that big of a deal. So at that point, it makes clear like what the issue is. We go for a walk arm in arm, and we get a little flirty. And then once we get back to the tree where we drink the black tea, she pulls out some oolong tea, which is even better than the black tea. It's like super delicious. And we talk about growing teas in the Ark. That is when she finally decides what she's going to do. Instead of drugs, they're going to grow and sell tea. So a bit later on, she's having another council meeting. Genzo is not sold in this tea thing. You're embarrassing our ancestors from old bullshit. Sakura gets fed up and is about to blast him when we step in and we discuss the promise she made to us about finding a compromise, which she's like, all right, fine. But she grabs us and runs off. She takes us to the garden where all the addictive drug plants are, and she just burns the shit out of it. At that juncture, Genzo and some of his like party or whatever, his allyship, they show up and they're like, no, we've burned it, you've destroyed the legacy. And she's like, listen, motherfucker, we're going to go to this team, it's going to work, and you're going to shut the fuck up and do it, or I'm going to kill you. So get with the fucking program. And he's like, okay. A bit later on, which he does, because later on, he's doing a report to her because he's in charge of this whole like area. And he talks about how they got 10 trees from the surface, only 2 survived, the transfer to the Ark and the genetic modification so they'd grow in this area. But because the 2 trees that survived are like the most rare prized trees that have like ever existed or something. And so when they started making and processing and selling the tea, the profits were way higher than expected, and it's way bigger than the drugs too. So he apologizes because she made the decision, because not only are they not losing men, but they're making a lot more money, and so she's doing like the group proud. And at that point, he leaves us alone. She talks about being selfish and wanting us all to herself. Also about how we come to help her without wanting anything in return. We then kiss some more. We go back to the cherry blossom trees, and then she states that her goal is to make us hers and hers alone, and not to be shared with all the other Nikkes. Kind of like what Admi was talking about. That wraps up her mod story. And that wraps up this week's events. Nikke got us victory. So go ahead, like, share, subscribe, comment, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.